美联储刚刚投下一枚加息炸弹，股市要崩了？别急，这位首席投资官却说，回调就是机会。最近市场人心惶惶，债券收益率一路走高，很多人都在问，到底涨到什么水平才会对股市构成真正的风险？有嘉宾指出，如果10年期国债收益率突破5%，那这轮回调就有了理由。但别忘了，之前的关税恐慌和 DeepSeek 时期都是绝佳的买入时机。像英伟达这样几乎没有债务的公司，反而是当前环境下最值得持有的资产。而那些资产负债表上压着巨额债务的2线公司，才是真正的风险点。更让人紧张的是，美联储官员安娜·保尔森刚刚放话，通胀太高了，暂停降息甚至加息才是健康的做法。不过，另一位资深投资官 Nancy 并不买账，她直言，美联储的官员最好少说话，多做事。2022年，正是同一个美联储眼睁睁看着通胀从小火苗烧成一场野火。他认为，无论美联储说什么，市场已经在自行定价。2年期国债收益率早已高于联邦基金利率，而美联储总是慢半拍。那么接下来市场会怎么走？ Nancy 给出的判断是，由于石油供给冲击和美联储新理事的鹰派立场，股市很可能出现一波10%到15%的回调。但他强调，这种幅度的调整平均每12个月就会来一次，虽然不好受，却始终是机会。他们团队在关税恐慌时买入，今年4月4日也成功抄底。这次他们同样准备出手。市场从来不缺恐惧，缺的是在恐惧中看到机会的眼睛。
There are those who are feeling a little bit jittery from what we hear from the people that we speak to. And it does lead me to ask the question, despite your confidence, at what point do these bond yields create a meaningful risk for investors? That is the question a lot of people are asking, because these yields just keep on going up.
No, you're right, Manisha. And I think if they get above the 5% range, then, then this correction, if you will, or this pullback will be justified. But remember, we heard a lot of the same things during the tariff tantrum and the DeepSeek period. That was an optimal time to buy stocks, which is what we were doing. The bond market really put pressure again on this administration, and the administration responded by pulling back and doing a U-turn. So the markets don't exist in a vacuum. Policymakers are listening, and the companies are still continuing to invest. So if you have a company like NVIDIA, for example, who reports tomorrow and doesn't really have any debt to speak of, those are the kind of companies, ironically, that you would want to own in this environment. Many of the Mag 7 names, as opposed to some of the second tier names, which have huge debt on their balance sheet and continue to need to borrow.
Yeah, and looking at the shift in tone and the sentiment of all the notes that are sitting in my inbox, I feel like we're just like maybe 1 or 2 blocks away from this Jenga tower from collapsing here. And I just wonder, because looking at this latest commentary from, Fed speak, we've got, of course, Anna Paulson, actually, her comments are coming through just about a few minutes ago, saying that it is healthy to consider pause, extended hold, or rate hikes even, because inflation is just too high. I wonder how the Fed conversation is going to likely derail this stock markets, because sure, there is inflationary, there are pressures, a shortage of petroleum products, and also the stock market itself, which is so embedded in the U.S. economy, playing such an important role in terms of wealth creation. What about the other side, Nancy?
Yeah, so Sherry, I certainly hope that Kevin Warsh gets some of the Fed speak to stop, because I don't think it's particularly constructive. Remember, this is the same Fed in 2022 that allowed inflation to go from a controlled burn to a wildflower, where there was no talk of hiking rates, and they were still expanding the balance sheet while inflation was creeping up. And we had in 2022 an oil shock that on a after inflation adjusted basis, price of oil was much more expensive than it is now. So I don't put a lot of credence into these comments. I think they're trying to direct the market. I don't think that's healthy. The market has continued to do what it wants to do. All the while the Fed was cutting, the 10-year really wasn't budging. So I think the Fed governors would do best to do their jobs and not really go on the speaking circuit. So I don't want to sound cynical or dismissive. There are risks, and there are always risks. And I think what we have to look at is how long this supply shock is going to last, and how high. I mean, you already have the 2-year above the Fed funds rate in terms of yield. So the market is acting, whether the Fed is or not. And the Fed is always behind, always.
Do you have a level in mind when you say you see correction coming at this point? How painful is it going to be? Is it 7,000 for S&P 500? I mean, people have different numbers now. What's your number, Nancy?
Yeah, so we don't do we don't forecast market levels, but I will say, I mean, your number gets you there because we're probably looking at a 10 to 15% correction, which, by the way, we get on average every 12 months. So it's never fun. It never feels good, but it is always an opportunity. We were buying during the tariff tantrum. We were buying earlier this year, and we called the bottom on April 4th, so we were a little bit late. But I think you will see with the supply shock in oil and with the new Fed governor, I think you'll see a pullback in stocks of somewhere around 10 to 15%.